there is an objective component of beauty that Thomas will talk about. And he says this: for beauty includes three conditions: integrity or perfection, since those things which are impaired are by their are by the very fact ugly, again, using that term the way Augustine does; due proportion or harmony, which we've talked about; and lastly, brightness or clarity, where things are called beautiful, which have a bright color. And so we'll kind of go into those a little bit. And so he will say that the perfection of beauty is in the second person of the Trinity, the Son of God. And so, again, he will take from Pythagoras a lot of his theory of beauty and appreciation of beauty. And beauty has to do primarily with the relations holding between the object itself and something else, or the parts of an object, to the whole from which they are formed. So again, it's a connection of arms and legs and head and neck and torso and so on in the human being, and in other creatures, that which makes them what they are. And so there's a proportion that goes into that. And every instance of beauty is an expression of due proportion. And so he's very similar to Augustine in that regard. That's my dog 11 years ago. So I did that just so you'd say, "Aw." So Father Matt does not appreciate God's creature. No, I'm just kidding. Aquinas says that though identified creatures do not obtain to a likeness of God according to species, they do attain to a kind of likeness to God, namely the likeness of a copy to its exemplar in the divine intellect, such as a constructed house represents the idea of that house in the mind of the architect who designed it. Since this is a statement about the relationship of every created thing to the Creator, there is an inherent proportion between every created thing and its exemplar relationship in the divine intellect. And so even though a creature may not have the capacity to appreciate its place in the order of things, God does. And so to the degree that God intends them to be what they are, God intends the dog to look like that, that leads to beauty, because that's the way God wants it to be, you know. And so even though creatures may not be able to appreciate beauty, or some of God's creatures may not be able to appreciate beauty, that doesn't mean that beauty doesn't exist in them or with them. And so that's an important piece. And then he says that the Son of God is said to be an express image of the Father, since the image, that is the Son, answers exactly to him whose image it is. So he will say that the Son of God is the perfect example of beauty in the image of God, in the image of the Godhead. And so then he moves on to talk about clarity. And he uses the Latin term claritas, which is brightness, is a light that makes beauty seen, the light of reason. And so for him, yes, and also use brightness a little bit like Augustine in terms of bright colors are better than dark colors. So there's that literal translation of lightness. But for him, light comes from our ability to reason. And so we are able to rationalize what beauty is because we are intelligent creatures. God made us that way, so we have the capacity to reason as to what is beautiful. Beauty and goodness are always together because they are based on the same form. They're both founded in reason. And so each created thing is beautiful to the extent that God makes it beautiful, giving to each a beauty appropriate to the properties of its kind. And so the properties relative to kind depend on form and therefore upon formal qualities like clarity. So I mean, so God makes us in a certain way, and so to the degree that we're able to rationalize what that is, God bless you, extends our appreciation of beauty. God bless you again. So, so that clarity, that brightness, is more a rational reality for Aquinas. And so that, because of that reason that we're given by God, we're able to appreciate beauty that much the more. And clarity also helps us to experience love. In making itself known to us through beauty, the good elicits our love. We love those things that are beautiful. you look at that picture of that mountain, if you're able to witness that in the flesh, then you love it because it inspires that in you. I mean, that love of appreciation of what God has made for us, and it just inspires love to come out of us. And so that love is something that's an important part of Thomas's clarity, beauty coming from clarity and reason. And so love is a natural expression of that. And then we talk about beauty and the wholeness and perfection. The last of the formal constituents of beauty for Thomas has to do with the wholeness or perfection of an object, which is said to be beautiful on account of its similitude to the ideal member of the species. And so again, that form is important to Thomas as it was to Aquinas. And so the more we're able to draw ourselves into that form, the more beautiful we are. And the more we live within that form or exist within that ideal form, the more perfect we are, the more beautiful we are. But again, I mean, like Augustine, I mean, he recognizes some of the things that we talked about in the previous slide. Now, this is my mom and dad. And so, you know, they're not perfect. My mom's actually passed away, but they're not perfect. But certainly, they, like all of us, are drawn to that ideal of perfection in beauty. And so, you know, we do what we can to live that way in our lives, more than just the way we look, or the form of who we are, but also the way we live our lives. And so beauty is likened to the Son, in as much as he as Son is himself truly and perfectly in the nature of the Father. And so again, the perfect beauty is the Son of God. And so when we look to perfection in our lives, when we look for a model of that beauty, we need to look no farther than Jesus Christ. Because as the Son of God, that is the perfect ideal of what the image of the Father is. But to the capacity that we are all created in the image and likeness of God, we share in that beauty. And so I'm not spending as much time on Thomas because his theology and philosophy of beauty is rather similar to Augustine's. And so, whoops, don't want to be there. So you can just look at my mom and dad for a little while. But there is another couple of questions that I'd like you to consider. Whoops, I lost my sheet. Another sheet. Thank you. Thank you. So in regards to Thomas Aquinas, look at the third question. Have you ever contemplated that there are objective components to beauty? How might you find yourself assessing beauty in light of knowledge of these components? So we talked about some of those objective components to beauty. Form, unity, harmony, peace, happiness, love, so on and so forth. Those are some of the objective definers for beauty in both Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. So how might you find yourself assessing beauty in light of knowledge of these components? So in other words, do you buy into the objective quality of beauty, qualities of beauty, or assessments of beauty? Because we're so wrapped up in our own subjective ideals of beauty and ugliness that it's hard to move beyond that to objective realities for beauty. And we live in a world that, you know, we determine just about everything in our lives. And so to think, I don't want somebody telling me what beauty is. I know what beauty is. It's this and that and the other thing. We'll get into that next week with art and music and architecture quite a bit more. But, you know, can you buy into what we've talked about both this week and the first week in terms of the objective standards for beauty? The objective standards for beauty in the first week being the relationship of goodness and truth and beauty, how they interconnect with each other, and then all the factors that we looked into today. So let me just kind of highlight a few of those as we begin this conversation at the table. Hold on one second. So we've got things like Sensation. We've got harmony, unity, form, likeness, image of God, peace, and so on. So as we look at some of those objective standards for beauty, can we, like I said, can we buy into that? And then the second question is, what are some of the similarities and differences in the philosophies and writings of St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas on beauty? Most of them are similarities, but see if you can talk about that for a little bit as well. Okay?